20 years ago, I was in university, and I studied cognitive science. So I was curious about consciousness, what it was, and it was a disappointment. Because when we got to the part, what is consciousness, which was of course in year 2 or 3, the answer was we don't know. And we have 2 or 3 theories for you, but they don't cover it, they're not satisfying. But that's all we have, sorry. So that's all right. Right now we are coming in contact with consciousness, and we can experience what it is, and it's how pleasant it is. But it's still troubling me because the study, it gave a lot of answers to other stuff. For example, what perceptions are, bodily sensations, vision. It's that it was electrochemical activity, signals traveling through nerves. Activity in the brain can be measured. When you have thoughts, the activity is visible. We have located where vision happens. We know which part of the brain is responsible for generating language, which part is responsible for understanding language. So there's all that. So all the contents of consciousness, thoughts, perceptions, they're all tied to the brain. They happen, at least part of them happen in the brain, physically.
They correlate with brain activity.
They correlate, yes.
They don't necessarily happen in the brain, but they correlate with brain activity.
They have a physical counterpart, so to say.
Yes, very different from saying they take place in the brain.
I agree.
But they have a counterpart in the brain, yes.
But then, if you are in the first or second phase of your steps, there's also something that witnesses these activities, so to say, which is consciousness. And the idea that might be coupled to the brain also is still very plausible to me. And that would mean that it is, when it's coupled to the brain is very, it's everything that you say consciousness is not. The brain is very fragile, very localized, very temporary, very finite. And so the fear that consciousness will die with the brain, I can't get rid of it.
Can you tell us how you think the brain generates consciousness?
No.
How would you answer that question? How does matter generate consciousness? That's the essence of what we're talking about.
I can only speculate. It seems like, there's a lot of activity going on in the brain, and most of it we don't see with our consciousness.
No, answer the question.
Yeah.
Don't be like a regular cognitive scientist and avoid the question. I'm not doubting there is a lot of activity in the brain.
Yeah.
The question was, how does matter generate consciousness?
I have no idea.
Why do you believe matter does generate consciousness?
Because the content of it has a physical counterpart that makes me search in that direction. So the content of consciousness, thoughts, perceptions, feelings, they are all taking part in physical matter, or they have a counterpart in physical matter. So why wouldn't the same be true for consciousness? and therefore share its properties. If I lose my eyes, I cannot see anymore. If I lose the part of my brain that understands language, I cannot understand language anymore. But why would that be true for all content of consciousness and not for consciousness itself? Especially if we are in phase 3 and we realize that perceptions are only modulations of consciousness. They are the same thing.
It seems to me that you have a deeply ingrained assumption that matter produces consciousness, and that you are trying to find a theory of consciousness that confirms that assumption. In other words, you're not starting like an honest scientist from a place of true openness, true unknowing, and basing your theories on evidence alone. That there is an assumption at the heart of your thesis, and you are looking for a theory that supports that assumption. Could the assumption be wrong? People used to think the earth was flat. Why? Because the evidence of the senses said so. People used to think the sun went round the earth. Why? Because the evidence of the senses said so. But in both cases, when we looked more deeply into the evidence, we were wrong. Could it be the same? Could the belief that consciousness is a byproduct of matter be a similar assumption, like the flat earth or the geocentric universe? Could we be wrong? After all, it is not in line with our experience.
I'm sorry?
It is not in line, the assumption is not in line with our experience. Our experience is that everything takes place in consciousness. Consciousness is the primary element of experience. It is not a secondary, it wasn't developed at some late stage of evolution. Our experience is that consciousness is primary and that everything takes place within it. Why not start with your experience and try to build a model of reality that satisfies or conforms to the evidence of experience? Because as soon as you begin a model of reality with a belief of something outside consciousness called matter, right there, the very first step you have taken is an unverifiable belief. All your subsequent theories, as they evolve, will contain that original belief, which can never be verified. What happens if that original belief is wrong? What happens if matter doesn't give rise to consciousness? What happens if matter, if consciousness is primary? After all, that is in line with our experience.
I would say that either believing in matter or not.
Say that again.
I would say that either if you believe in matter or not is ultimately irrelevant.
Well, I don't think it's irrelevant because you're suggesting that matter generates consciousness. And therefore matter must be something that is prior to and therefore independent of consciousness. Now, can you find anything in your experience that is prior to and independent of, or indeed can anyone or has anyone ever found anything in experience that is prior to or independent of consciousness?
No.
So this stuff called matter is a belief. Nobody has ever found it. We believe it's there, but nobody has ever found it. Not only do we believe it's there, we believe that it generates the only thing that we do experience, which is consciousness. So we believe that that which is never experienced gives rise to that which is always experienced. Now, how convoluted is that? Why not start with that which is always experienced and never leave that which is experienced? Why not build a model of reality, if you want to build a model of reality, that can be tested in experience, that doesn't go into abstraction? Look around at the world. Look at what human beings are doing to each other and to their planet. If you were an alien species visiting Earth, would you look at human beings and think, wow, what an intelligent species. I want to know about their ideas. I would want to know what makes these people tick, because we'd like to have a civilization like theirs. Would the alien think like that? No, the alien would think, what is wrong with these people? Look at the way they treat one another. Look at the way they treat their animals. Look at the way they treat their earth. And they would start exploring the fundamental ideas that inform the way we behave and relate with one another. And I think they would trace back the malaise in our culture to this belief that dead inert stuff called matter gives rise to consciousness, and that each of our consciousnesses are separate, limited, enclosed within our bodies. So we are all separate from one another, separate fragments, and everyone and everything out there is all separate. I think they would trace back the way we treat each other and our animals and our planet to this original idea. Do you know Bernardo Kastrup's writing?
No.
I recommend it for you. He's a scientist that speaks your language.
And yours too? Or?
And mine too.
Okay.
Yes. He spans both our worlds.
Bernardo Kastrup?
Kastrup. Kastrup.
Kastrup.
And
thank you.
He has made it his mission, unlike me, who is really preaching to the choir. He has made it his job to speak about these matters to materialist scientists. And he is qualified as a cognitive scientist to do so. And he has a much harder task than I do.